Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and it is now the 29th of August. We're fast moving towards September. We had a big storm last night and it was big, thunderstorm, and I did lose internet very briefly. Fortunately, it came right back on and I didn't lose power. It was a little bit of a blip, but it came back on. And this morning, now I'm really glad. Good morning, Sam. Just talking about our storm yesterday. I was really glad that I actually didn't opt to do yard work earlier this week, because now there's like a whole lot of leaves down already. It's already starting to look like autumn here because it's a little yellow leaves that usually come off of the walnut trees around here. And so it's very much so it's starting to look that way, although there's some mixtures of some of the red maple leaves and stuff as well. So I took some photographs this morning of the pavement, and I think I took some video last night of the storm coming in and everything just kind of whipping around. Because I don't know, I like that. I like those kind of moments. I like to kind of be in those kind of moments and experience them, because there's a lot to kind of be seen in that. I like when nature's kind of going into its death throes, which is terrible to say, but it's because everything just has so much, it starts to get so much color to it. And, of course, when I have to start raking leaves, I took my fence out in the back of my yard, along the back where the woods are, mainly because I thought, okay, that's every year when I have to do leaves, I can't put them, most people, you can put them out front and they come by with that leaf vacuum and they pick it up. Because of what I have in the front, I had gravel and stuff in the front, they wouldn't do it because they didn't want the rocks getting sucked up in their thing. Plus, my front stoop was right on the road. It's a very narrow road. This is what they call a slip road. It's a kind of off the beaten path. And so if they come down with their machine, they have to be in a space where there's no extra rocks or sticks or anything. They don't want to pick any of that up. So I've always had to try to find a way to get rid of my leaves. Usually I had to dump them over the fence, which is really annoying because there's just no way. And you can't put them in bags either. They would not allow you to bag them. So that just kind of left things, so now I was just like, you know what? That way I can just take the leaf blower and blow everything into the backyard, into the woods where it would have gone anyway, and then I don't have leaves piling up against a fence. I can just put it back there, and which is what my neighbors do with a lot of their leaves. So it works perfect. So anyway, so that's not to go into my yard work things. I do need to actually take a whole day to power wash, to do some repainting around the house, spot painting on the house, repaint my basement doors. And also I have some stuff in the front that needs repainting. I need to trim on stuff on my porch, but I need to wash everything down first, so I need some nice weather to do that. And we've been kind of mixed. When it's hot and humid, it's not a good time to do it. Plus, I've been busy as heck. I was just thinking about that this morning. I said I've had so many people registering for classes, and I've had an uptick in clients, regular clients. This has been really great. And this was something that was promised to me, when the spiritual realm, they said, no, it's all going to pick up. You'll see after July into August, because July was a really, really tough month financially. And even early August was, but now it's I'm like, oh, okay. If this keeps up, I will be making enough money to be able to pay all my bills. And I'm still not quite where I need to be, but I'm definitely getting there. So all of that is really good news. So what am I going to talk about this morning? Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, there was I got more Azrael messages yesterday. In fact, no, actually it was this morning, because after I did the live stream, he had one. Well, I did do a Azrael channeling, which I still have to edit and put up. I need to I like to edit out. There's long spaces of quiet. Nobody wants to sit there through that unless there's something in it that's worth seeing. So I like to go through and just keep it to the point. Initially I wasn't doing that, but then I was like, you know what, some of these stretches were too long for whatever reason, and some of them, so I do that. So there'll be a new Azrael video coming out as well. But one of the things that came through this morning, I got a really interesting message. What was it? I wrote it down. I have it over here. It was Isro apaeox chicle pasbas etharzi iada noan dosig fabuan ag, which translates to promise to remain in the mysteries, daughter, is literally what that means. Promise to remain in the mysteries. And the interesting part of that, peace will come in the highest, and the night poisons no one. That's what that means in the end. And it's written kind of, I'm noticing with the angelic language that they stick verbs at the end a lot of the time, which is like what you see in Latin and some other languages where the verb ends up being at the end of the sentence rather than in the word order that we might think of when we normally speak. Normally we do subject, verb, object. I've noticed that that's what they're doing. So it gives you kind of that Yoda-ish quality, you will do this, you will. It's just kind of like there's kind of a weird quality to it. But and what his follow-up was to that was he had said something about, because remember I talked about everything that happened on the 19th, and it's interesting because some people were not able to see that live stream, and I was kind of told, I don't put them all up on YouTube. They said don't put that one up. Like, if people who are going to see it on Instagram are the people who are going to see it. And that's interesting because I said, well, did I say something I shouldn't have said? They said no, but it's just not everybody's meant to see it. Some people are meant to see what you say, some people are not. And it's interesting because like Karenna, she was trying to watch it, and I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't know if there was something in that message that maybe which I don't think there was anything particularly unsettling in it, but maybe there would have been to her. And they were like, no, we don't want her to misinterpret it or take it the wrong way or, whatever. So I don't know. So it was interesting. So I don't know. So I as a general rule, I don't always want to talk about those kind of messages when they come through. I mean, unless he says, yeah, I want you to talk to people about it. And so this was interesting. So we had talked about what had happened, where there was this whole confrontation with Metatron and with the this angelic beings that were basically still kind of writing the narrative of this world that was very, very lopsided. It was very what we would call here patriarchal. It's very it teaches you to fear difference and pits dark against light and does things, and that's why he's saying no, the dark poisons no one. That's why he says this. Because there's got to be a new way of thinking. And actually, even when I watch some other readers and channelers and things, a lot of the messages that are coming through, right, are pretty much the same. Like, you got to get it together, people. Stop acting like you're divided and at war with each other. You have to bring it together here. And which is probably not a new message, but it's becoming a more urgent message. Now, interestingly, Jenny had cooked me up with messages from a woman. I think what's her name? Was her name Amanda Ellis? I'm trying to think. I think that's her name. And I guess she was interested in the messages that she had to say, but she had said that we had to be careful because people were being censored in this world. And I was like, well, who is she channeling? And she said Metatron. I said, oh, okay, yeah. Well, Metatron is being censored in this world, so it makes perfect sense that he would say that. But she was kind of wondering about that, and I thought, no, I said I will look at that one the other way around. I think he's just complaining because he's been censored. But is she pretty cool? Okay. I have to watch what she has to say. But it's interesting that that's who she channels, and that the message that she got was that there's some kind of censorship going on. And I'm like, yeah, well, from his perspective, that's exactly how he's viewing it. Which is why I was told, like, if he gives an apology for things, don't accept it, But it was made a little bit more clear to me that what I was, like, I'm somebody who's here. Like, I think a lot of beings in angelic space, they know kind of what's going on here, but they're not really connected. It's the same way, it's like if you, as much as I've seen, don't take my word for it, haha. Okay, well, yeah, like I said, I'm not denigrating her in any way. I'm not saying she's not legit or that she's not channeling or anything. Good morning, Pat. So I'm not denigrating anything that Amanda Ellis says. I mean, I'm sure she's great in what she does and everything, and that she's legit. But I just think it's funny that that's who she's. But again, because a lot of people still associate Metatron with sacred geometry, and with all of this other stuff, and so yeah, I mean, it's. I don't know. It's very much, so I just thought it was really interesting that her message came through, that he's like, that there's some censorship that's going on. And it's like, but apparently what's happened is a lot of these angelic beings are now kind of being born here. He said there's 4 of them. There's 4 of them that were still divided. And that apparently what my role was to explain to them, because they're all thinking like, okay, yeah, there's this divided viewpoint. It's not right, but so what? I mean, it's working. It's fine. And they're like, no, it's not working. It's really bad. It's actually not going to lead anywhere good. So, so that's why I think it was kind of like, yeah, you're here, so you need to tell them like, no, this is what's happening. And so at least that's part of, I'm sure this was not just all about me. I'm sure that there was others probably who were similarly making that argument, because I was told there was going to be like a discussion or an argument. Again, not one that I can consciously remember, only remember parts of it. But basically saying, and so they were kind of like almost being, they're being sent here to kind of say like, okay, you need to go see this for yourself. So they may be being born as different people right now and seeing kind of like what kind of world we're getting into, or, you know, whatever it is, they're you know, they were there, now they're here. And to them, they said that realm is so much nicer than this one, even though this one is really nice. By comparison, they're like, oh God, we're going to the garbage dump. So it's not that, you know, it's just that there are just certain things about here that feel more oppressive when you're kind of in that realm. So it's so anyway, yeah. So so he said basically that's what's going to. He says the good thing is that will change their way of thinking once they see it for themselves. If they're skeptical and now they see it for themselves, then it's like, oh, okay. Then they'll be on the same page with where things need to be, and then of course that's when they would return to where they were after that point. So how long that would take, I have no clue. But that was the message I got this morning. And he said, yeah, you want to, you know, go ahead and share that one. So I was like, okay. So I'm sharing it, but it's interesting. So I still hear people, like I get messages from people saying, oh, we're in a terrible place. You know, all these corporations have taken over, all this stuff is happening, and we're all kind of being pushed through. And I'm like, just give it time. It's not, I already can feel that it's not going to stay there. Things are already shifting. I got some message from somebody the other night about, you know, far right in the UK and stuff like that, and I was like, it's shifting out. I mean, yeah, you don't, you know, people need to be vigilant about it. They can't just shrug their shoulders at it, but at the same time, it is kind of, I feel like this is a way of thinking that's divided and says we hate people who are different from us. That's what we need to fight against. And honestly, like when I think about darkness and the associations that we have with darkness, the reason people say, like, I've been told from a marketing perspective to talk about myself as a dark worker. That's not a good thing. People will think you're, you know, doing evil magic and stuff like that. And I'm like, you know, it's because we associate anything dark with what's evil. And there's some serious problems with that. Probably most of European colonialism is based on that idea. You have white-skinned people versus darker people. Those darker people must be savages, right? Oh, they're not they're going to be, they're the unsaved, right? I mean, you saw those attitudes that are coming up. I mean, and that's just one example. I mean, when people look at it, and when people look at the feminine as being dark because they associate it with the earth, and the earth, of course, is associated with, you know, sinful things and with, you know, pleasures of the flesh and all the things. That's not, you're supposed to focus up here, you're not supposed to focus down here. When there's this whole mentality that says, oh, you know, be very afraid of anything that is dark, because if it's hidden, if it doesn't have, you know, glaring lights on it, then somehow it's suspect. And my point is always like, no, that's, you know, as Asriel said this morning, the dark poisons no one. So it's not really, that's not what it is. The dark is the space where the treasure is. The dark, you know, when we talk about the treasure that's hard to attain, it's usually in the dark. You don't get it by staying in one place. Now that leads to the second thing I wanted to talk about, because we had talked yesterday a little bit, and I have talked at times about attitudes that kind of keep us in a box, that keep us in one place. And it kind of going on, I was thinking about it this morning, and thinking about Rupert Sheldrake and his theory of what they call morphic resonance. Now, Sheldrake is an interesting guy because right now he's considered to be a scientific heretic, like, you know, and that's the way, it's interesting, in religion, if you are somebody who doesn't, you know, who talks about something that goes against the dogma of a particular religion. Good morning, Alex. If you talk about something that goes against the dogma, then you are a heretic. Or you are, you know, you're an unbeliever, or you're a blasphemer, you know, like whatever you are. But it's something made to discredit you and say, well, you're not somebody who should be listened to because they're preaching a falsehood, right? In the scientific community, they just accuse you of pseudoscience. Okay, that's their, and I've always said, that's when I teach my religion students, they actually have a thing about religion. We have a section on like religion and science in their kind of understanding religion class. And they'll always talk about it as, well, science is based on facts and religion is just based on belief. I'm like, no, they're both based they're both based on a view of truth. Now, they don't take the same view of truth. It's like Alan Watts said. He said there's the ceramic model and the fully automatic model, and that's the way he describes those two points of view. So the ceramic model is everything's made, God made everything, and God's like a benevolent king, and he's a judge, and da-da-da. So that's one point of view. The other point of view is exactly the same as that one, only they just take God out of it and say, no, it's, yes, there are laws and rules by which everything is ordered and nice, but there's nobody responsible for it. It just all kind of happened on its own. So you have these are the two perspectives, but they're two sides of the same coin. They're heads and tails. They're two sides of the same coin. And Sheldrake's an interesting example of that, because I've read his book. He wrote a book called The Science Delusion. And the thing is, and just like with religion, like if I say anything where I say, about, if you say something that's critical of a particular point of view, like if I were to say something critical of a particular church or a particular doctrine, people would say, oh, well, you're being anti that religion. And I'm saying, well, no, I'm not being anti that religion. If I see something that I think is a belief that maybe is not one of the eternal truths of that religion, or not something that should be, that's something that's probably changed. Maybe it was a belief that made sense, over 1,000 years ago, and probably not so now. Then you're immediately anti-religion, right? Well, of course, I'm not anti-religion. I mean, there's certain social aspects of religion that I'm anti, but not necessarily as a general thing. People have to choose their paths, and some people, they're very drawn. It's funny. Gina Devine, who I used to work with at the Rockbox, just posted on her page. She did a little reel on how. A little video on how, doing readings, how she says spirit's actually all around people. And she's actually a really grounded person. Good morning, Suda. Gina's actually, I think she's an Aquarius, but she's very Capricorn. Like she's the one who I met when she was like, please tell me you don't believe in this 5D crap. Like she was just like that's the kind of person that she is. And that was one of the reasons she hired me, because she's like, okay, good, you've got your feet on the ground. But she says, she goes, I know it's very hard to prove scientifically, but there's spirit all around. There's people watching over all the time, people who are watching over to our benefit. And people or other beings, whatever kinds of beings they may be, good morning. Like they could be deities, they could be angelic beings, they could be daemonic beings. When I say daemonic, I mean really angels are that. They're intermediaries. They're kind of connecting you with something else. Any kind of connector, messenger, intermediary spirit is called a daemon in Greek. The word demon does come out of that, but that's the idea that any kind of intermediary is somehow automatically evil. And I'm like, well, you don't think angels are? So anyway, that's that kind of a thing. But Sheldrake was interesting to me because when I read The Science Delusion, he's very, very clear right in the beginning of that book that he is not anti-science. He says, I'm not anti-science. I'm not. He was trained as a chemist. And I know he went to, I feel like he was another Cambridge guy. I feel like he was definitely a well-respected chemist. But I think he also kind of delved into certain theories having to do with biology and behavior and certain things that he would notice, because his point of view was that when things happen that don't neatly fit into the causal patterns that we are told that things fit into. Because, really, when you're talking about scientific theory and law, how does scientific method work? Something has to be repeatable, right? It's not just that you can do an experiment and get the result you expect. It has to be a repeatable result. It can't just be something that happens one time. If it happens one time, and it's like, usually in the quantum field, because quantum effects disappear so quickly, a lot of times one time they're like, okay, well, we did catch it one time, like they were doing with that whole God particle thing, with the Higgs boson. Like they were very animated about that. But again, what they don't seem to recognize is they say, well, yes, but because we're working in the realm of experimental facts, that really the only truth comes out of what we're doing, and anything else is just nonsense and delusion and pseudoscience. And that's what Sheldrake is saying. He's like, you're doing the same thing that fundamentalist religious people are doing. You're putting things in a box and saying, no, anybody who dares to look at the anomalies or think outside the box is a is a scientific version of a heretic. And then that basically shuts down. That person's discredited. They can't work, and that's why a lot of people, when they see things, they're afraid to say anything because they're afraid of going against the. And that's why I used to really like Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he kind of gets on my nerves now because he kind of has this very arrogant attitude about all the stupid people who just don't obviously see the truth of science. I'm like, yeah, well, just like years ago, all the stupid people who didn't see the truth of the church, or all the stupid people who didn't see the obvious truth of this thing or that thing. No, they're not stupid people. It's people who are saying, and really, for science to really work the way it's supposed to, you need to ask questions. And because that's what they'll always say. Well, we're not like religion. We don't just have beliefs. We test things and we measure, and if we get new data, we revise our theories. Well, yes, they do. But it takes a very long time, which is fair enough if you have a very rigid standard of what fits. But it's only things that are going to fit into that methodology and that pattern. And that's assuming that all truth can be derived from doing things that way, because it assumes a very material basis for things, or at least a very strongly mathematical basis for things in a way that, that's why you develop these elaborate tests, like in physics, like with the Large Hadron Collider and things like that. You're developing situations where you can test what your hypothesis is. And so Sheldrake, after he's been considered, I think this is probably why he wrote this book, and he brought up 10 different points of science as to why they are, and I'm sorry, his book makes complete and total sense. He's not a crank, he's not a pseudoscientist. It all really makes really good sense. And he had a theory that he came up with around 1981 called morphic resonance. And so this is the idea that what he calls morphs or fields. Like there's different fields that interact with each other. So I actually had to write it down for myself just to get it clear. He says similar forms or fields of information, or morphs, exchange information and reverberate within a universal life force. And according to him, all of us, this is his theory anyway, all of us have a morphogenic field that shapes, organizes, and stabilizes their form, and that's influenced by similar organisms that came before. The more often a process occurs, the easier it will be for it to happen again in the future. So the idea is that, that our perception of reality is shaped by, that it's more like we're existing in a field, and that field interacts with a broader field, okay? And that, to me, that kind of goes along with, I think, what people are even finding, or even like Jung's idea of a collective consciousness, if you want to talk about it just in terms of our perceptions of reality. I mean, you have external stimuli and you respond to it, but it's interesting how when you have a science that tries to predicate everything just on the organs of the body, consciousness is a byproduct of the organs of the body. That's one heck of a byproduct. I mean, but that's the way they tell it. Oh, well, it's just accidental that we all have all this consciousness. Well, again, and I'm not necessarily, because when you say, really, then people think, oh, well, you're saying a creator put this consciousness in us. And I'm not saying that either. I mean, it's that there's a much more complex reality there that we are a part of, and we are only perceiving things. And when you think about how your body acts, when you react to stimuli, your body creates protective responses. So you fall down and you hurt your leg, or you accidentally burn yourself when you're taking something out of the oven or whatever. What does your body do? It immediately floods with endorphins and certain things to that area to try to stabilize it. Like between your immune system and these other chemical responses in the body, it's responding to try to stabilize the body. Right? It's like there's information that's being exchanged there. It's trying to do things. But what I find interesting is that when it comes to consciousness, a lot of people want to treat certain effects as the effects as kind of the causes. So a good example, when we have an anxiety response, when something makes us anxious, we have our amygdala become very, very active now in the brain. Now, the amygdala can also be something that, there can be people where, just kind of like anything else in the body, where if you've had a trauma, it can kind of keep acting over and over again, like it doesn't release that trauma. That's why there's a lot of work that's done on releasing body trauma, because it lets out those that trapped trauma. that can make your body still act as though it's in the crisis situation. But it's an effect. It's not a cause. I mean, if it gets stuck in a loop, it can be a type of a cause. But strictly speaking, these things are responses. I've said this about, I'm sure I've repeated this numerous times, but falling in love. I read a study about, and I always get these mixed up because I know there's a medication that's similar, but I want to say it's oxytocin. It could be slightly different from that. It's the one that's similar. It's an enzyme that's similar to that name anyway. And but that is produced when people have feelings of happiness or when people have feelings of falling in love with somebody. They said the body produces a lot of that particular chemical. And this is a chemical that gives us that kind of blissful feeling. So what the conclusion tends to be is, yeah, well, you have emotions and feelings because of these chemicals. And it's like, no, those chemicals are coming in response to a stimuli. That's just the way that it's creating that feeling. But the other way around is not true. You can't inject somebody with that enzyme and then they're going to just, like Cupid's arrow, you're going to look at somebody and fall in love with them. It's not how it works. It's kind of, there's too much of reliance saying, oh, well, that chemical reaction occurred, so therefore that explains it. Not really. It doesn't explain the broader context of things. So he talks a lot about this, and they were saying that, and the examples that they gave of what Sheldrake's theory would have explained were phantom limbs, how your pets know when you're about to come home, how animals know anything that's coming, how crystals form and how they form structures that are very, very similar to each other, that they're kind of repeating something, that there's information that's causing them to repeat this, and also the way in a lot of evolutionary processes, the way that he feels that they work is based on this idea of morphic resonance. And again, now the problem with this theory is that it's largely untested, and the reason it's largely untested, which is what he complains about endlessly, is that it's because first it was received very well, and then they just said, oh no, that's pseudoscience, and nobody will test his theory. To me, I'm like, okay, in order to disprove his theory, if you think it's a lot of bunk, just because it doesn't fit into a certain box, he's like, well, he says it could be a lot of bunk. He's not even saying, oh no, I absolutely say this is the way it is. He says, but nobody will allow it to be tested. Nobody will they will not, and that's what it said. To this day, it's still largely untested. There are people, I did see some Science Direct articles that suggested that there are people who are trying to do trying to gather some empirical data on that. I haven't looked into what the results of that are. But he's trying to come up for an explanation, just kind of like Jung did with psychology. He's trying to say, like, okay, there's more to this than just the chemical processes, or just the physical, or just the immediate, or just food, clothing, shelter, just the survival stuff. There's more to us than just beings that are trying to eat, take a crap, and eat, sleep, take a crap, and not die. Like there's more to life than that. But that's the way certain theories have kind of made us out to be. One example I remember that Sheldrake gave from the book was he was talking about, this was interesting, it's the yogis in India who are able to go for very long periods of time with no food. And now some people, he says initially, when he heard, when he went to India and was told, oh, this person hasn't eaten for like 3 months, and of course they're still fine and they're vital and they're alive, and he was skeptical. He thought, well, I first thought anybody would have, they're probably sneaking food or water somewhere here and there, and people just don't notice it, so, they haven't eaten, But then apparently there was a study done in India where somebody said, okay, we're going to take one of these, the people who have said this, and we're going to put them like in a room, like in a hospital, nice room, like controlled suite or whatever, but with cameras so that they could see what this person was doing. And they did it for 30 days. And they said, okay, we want to see, if this person's really gone this long without eating. And of course, also just doing some tests of like bodily functions and what may be going on. And what they found was, no, these people were legitimately not eating or drinking. And Sheldrake says, okay, so if you've done a test of that and you can prove that this person's not, faking it, and, because that's our first thing, they're faking it. There's something, about that. He says, if you can show that this person's not faking it, He said, then the question then becomes, he says, what science needs to be interested in. Now, yeah, this seems like an anomaly. He's like, but then, okay, then how is this happening? You know, how is this happening? Good morning. And so so then the question becomes, because if we're in a world where, for example, we're dealing with food shortages or scarcity or mass famine or things like that, are there other ways that human beings can survive, you know, without food? I mean, because we assume that, no, biologically we need to eat and have water and, you know, things to survive. We need to be hydrated, we need to eat. So then the question becomes, he says, is this something that we can adapt to? Is this something that we can learn? Is this an avenue that we can look at? But all that kind of thinking gets shut down. They say, no, people will still say, oh no, it's probably just fake. So we're not going to pay any attention to that. And you dismiss it out of hand. And he says, are you dismissing things that could potentially change our future in our survival in a very meaningful way? Now again, he's not saying that 100% this is what it's going to be. But he's saying, if we don't explore it, if we don't see how these things work, and if you're going to follow scientific method, okay, then how are we going to devise experiments to show that these things work, or how are we going to prove or validate something? Then do it. I mean, how are we going to, if we just say, oh no, that's just stupid, and I think it's pseudoscience, and we're not going to test it. And to me, I'm like, until you've tested it and can absolutely prove that it's not something. It's like people who always, when people think, I know a lot of people like this, especially people who have been trained in philosophy. They can tend to have this attitude of, oh well, your argument's not logical. There's a logical fallacy in here, because according to logic, you have to reason this way. Like there's rules to that. And I'm like, okay, but most people, lay people fast for prolonged periods of time too. Yes, exactly. Well, yes, and you will see that happening as well. And and then the question becomes, if you're fasting for long periods of time, then what? And again, in theory, the body should be shutting down, but because it's not, and that person is everything's just working normally as it should, then it becomes, okay, well, then how is that happening? Like, that's the question science should explore. How, not just, oh, it's not happening, that person's a liar and a fake. How is it happening? And then if the person's later proven that there's something about it that's not what it appears to be, then that'll come out, right? So it's about testing those kinds of facts. But what was I saying? Just move this over because I got to start doing our reading. We're already at 7:32 or 7:33. It's just this idea that my point being is that science can sometimes just be it can have another version of religion. It can have a dogma. It can have a boundary that you are not allowed to cross. When I was in Oxford back in 2009, I was invited to a conference. It was really, I think it was I forget what I was invited for, but it ended up kind of being religion, science, and law kind of a thing. It was moderated by the canon of Trinity College. And basically there were some of us who were speakers, and well, I wasn't a speaker at this one, but I was actually chosen as a respondent to somebody's paper, where I had to, initiate the questions and the response. So, and I think that one was actually on, it was connected to the idea of vaccines. So anyway, that was long before COVID, obviously. It was like 10 years before COVID. But anyway, I remember walking into this conference, and there were a lot of evangelicals there, like hardline evangelicals, and I thought it was so funny because some of them, like, were the real hardline Bible thumpers, were just like, you'd ask them how they were, they'd be like, oh, great, I'm just really happy, I'm great, and I was like, oh, I guess you are. Like, I've never seen anybody wound so tightly and determined to be, Jesus fucking loves me, never seen somebody, so I was just like, yeah, okay, if you say so. And then on the other hand, we had people showing up wearing t-shirts saying, like, I believe in the Higgs boson, I'm like, and of course the two of them kind of looked at each other with, with the stink eye, but it was, or I mean, they would talk to each other, but there was always kind of a thing of like, who had more of the knowledge than the other person. And me kind of not really falling strongly into either camp. It's like, yes, I believe in science. I'm definitely not fundamentalist in my religious views, but I'm also well aware that science doesn't know everything either, is my point. That doesn't, by the way, that's an argument that a lot of creationists will use. Will say, well, see, evolution's just a theory. I'm like, no, that misses the point. There's plenty of evidence that things have evolved and changed over time. Creation is, to read the Genesis story as, oh, the world began 6,000 years ago. I'm like, no, there's monuments out there that are way older than that. And, it's just, yeah, there's that aspect of things is just not, I feel like, I believe, I believe those kinds of creation stories have a truth, but it's not a literal truth. Okay, that's the way I would put it. And this is me putting my religion professor hat on, but actually my classes do go live today, I think, for my university students, so we'll see how that goes. And I was talking about my school and my Kickstarter. I just about got the video done. I had a client last night, so I didn't end up quite finishing, but that's fine, because also I had the internet went out and stuff like that, so I'm gonna finish that this morning and hopefully get the Kickstarter up. And finally get this piece edited that I need to get edited. This is my last opportunity to do it in August because I have a busy weekend coming up. But anyway, so let's do our reading. Now today I decided I want to do our 4 cards with the Essential Oil Oracle. I don't know why. That's what jumped into my head to do today. So that's what I'm going to do. A lot of red cards today. Okay. All right. So here are our cards for today. So our center card for today is the grounding card. Okay. And our keyword on this is rooted. And the trigger statement is, I am somewhere else. You know, it's all that Piscean energy. True statement, right here, right now, everything is perfect. Allow your energy to shift to the material plane where it is needed to help you complete what you have set out to do. Okay, so that's our center card, grounding. Lately, I know certainly with the astrology, I know Venus had opposed Neptune the other day. There was some different aspects that were going on that were kind of making us kind of be in this floaty space. So it's saying, and we are in the time of Virgo, so it's kind of like, no, we want to get our feet on the ground and get to work. The underfeeling of which we're unaware is we have patchouli oil card. And the key word is earthly. The trigger statement is, I hate my body. The true statement is, my body is my temple. Remember that you are a spiritual being having an earthly experience, and revere your loyal, sacred body. Now that's interesting in light of what we're just saying, because I'm talking about the body and the way the body protects you. See, that's my point, is that with the environment, we're being protected. Our nervous system, our brain, and everything is meant to protect us. When the brain starts to break down, when those protections start to go away, we may start to perceive things that our mind really isn't processing, or we may not process time the same way, or things start to change. And we always look at that as something that is seen as more of a like a mental illness, is the way we tend to look at it, because people are not, within that space and within that order, and the body is supposed to kind of protect everything and keep the system running. That's what your body is for. But your body isn't, you have to allow yourself to engage in all of your senses, including the ones that we are told we shouldn't pay attention to, like intuition and so forth, to get the full information about our environment. The external feeling of which we're aware is the celery seed card, and the word is cleanse. And the trigger statement is, there is no answer. The true statement is, I am the answer. The aligned outcome for you is simple, but not necessarily easy. Commit your goals to heart each day and know every single action will take you closer to them. Okay, so if we look at these 3 in a row, we have grounding, patchouli, and celery seed. So we've got rooted, being here, okay, shifting your energy to what you need to do here. We have this idea of, if we've been in a space that's been kind of disconnected or escapist, its inner feeling is just kind of like, maybe we don't want to be in the body, maybe we don't want to have to do the things. But this is saying, yes, it's not easy, but we need to do this. We need to, you need to in order to work towards your goals, there's things that you have to do. It's like we want to look at things, we want to imagine big and also keep our feet on the ground. Which by the way, speaking of Sheldrake, I actually feel that he very much does that. He's not just floating away in some kind of a space of ideas that seem not very certainly not very practical. But I would not say that that's the case here. So we're talking about something that has to stay rooted in our bodies and in what we know. So our advice card is the Green Mandarin card, and that is opportunity. The trigger statement is, I doubt it. The true statement is, there is hope. With fresh eyes, see the potential within the situation. It's interesting, right? Yes, we want to remain grounded. And also to remain grounded, I mean, if you want to manifest any ideas that you have, the only way you can manifest them is if your feet is on the ground. You have to, the idea is you're taking it and you're doing something with it. It's not just something kind of floating around. But you kind of go with it. You go with it, and you take the actions that you need to do to manifest whatever needs to be manifest in your immediate present. Our outcome here is the Roman chamomile card, and the key word here is destiny. The trigger statement is, I am lost. The true statement is, I do what I love. There is a path waiting just for you. Open your heart and mind so you can use it on your journey to fulfillment. Yeah, and that's interesting too. Wasn't this a conversation I was having last night about being open to what, you want to be grounded in here, but you want to be open to the information that's coming into you, whether you think about that as coming from spirit, whether you think about it as coming from your inner voice, whether you think about it as just having a awareness of what's going on in the environment. Allowing yourself to tune in ways that are not just about the way your mind tries to beat everything to death. Your mind is part of it. I mean, it's not, we're not throwing that out, but the idea is to move. That's why I think we're all being pushed to move towards the heart space. Focusing on what it is that we love, not necessarily making all of our judgments based on very, very rigid rules, but rather making it based on, on the heart space, on what feels right in a particular situation, on empathy for another person, and other people. Though, I think that was something else I was saying right last night too, is just like when we have certain emotions too, like when we're hurt and when we're wounded and when we're angry, that having empathy does not necessarily mean that we have to, if somebody has wronged us, that we have to say, oh, well, that person probably went through this thing, so I shouldn't feel, so I'm not going to be angry. If you're, that's not always a good strategy, because if you're angry, then you're going to be angry. And then you're just going to turn it back on yourself, and then you're just going to be mad at yourself, like, well, you should have more empathy for that person. And that doesn't work either. These are all things you pass through. And again, there is kind of a modicum that our thoughts create everything. Well, yes, our thoughts do have a creative power, but they're far from being the only thing that can make things work. That's why I think people saying affirmations to death to themselves, or always just deciding that they're going to be rigidly positive, God damn it, no matter what happens. That's not a way to function, because it doesn't really help to do that, to kind of be in that space of what it does ultimately is it's going to lead either to depression, or it's going to lead to that projected rage on other people. Like, you're going to look at everybody around you and everybody's the enemy, when really it's not, you know what I mean? Or kind of like, I'm the person in the right and everybody else is in the wrong. And, and again, sometimes we are in the right and other people are in the wrong. But it's the case of, it's like, okay, they did that, that sucks. They're a jerk or whatever. I move through those feelings and I move on. And then, if things change later, you flow with what changes later, or you might just kind of think like, yeah, that's a person I think I don't want to interact with or trust or whatever. But everybody has to make, decisions based on, what's happening for them. But I think that's just the thing too. It's I think we're kind of being told to get outside of the box and open the heart a little bit. That doesn't mean that we have to just, because I think a lot of something Blooming karmas. Yeah, I think that's what I was. Yeah, we were talking about that. A blooming karma. Yeah, and that's an idea that I had read about in Tantra, which is the idea that part of the reason that tantrics will lean into a behavior, they will lean into it because it is something that might be considered a vice, for example, because it's almost okay. I can give a metaphor for this. It's like the idea. I think my mother had told me that at one point she had worked in a candy shop when she was. This is back in the 1940s. Well, wouldn't have been the 40s. Would have been like the 50s. And she would work in and they had a policy of you can eat as much candy as you want. Like if you work there, you can take as much, and that sounds like great. Oh my God! So the first thing, you're eating a ton of candy. By the time you've gotten to day 2 or 3, you're sick of candy. You don't want to eat another, and they know that. So that's why they're saying, yeah, you can take as much as you want, because eventually you're not going to want to take any. And that's the thing. It's a bloom. That's what we talk about, a blooming karma. It's like you sometimes the thing is to just say, okay, I'm going to go through it. Okay, that doesn't mean we're going to take toxic actions. Although, like, if you eat a lot of candy, you might end up with a stomach ache, and then you're going to be like, okay, yeah, you eventually will get to the point where you feel like this thing that you, this feeling, it kind of drains itself of its energy. It's kind of like, a filled balloon that eventually just, fizzles out. So that's what we mean. Or a flower that blooms and then eventually the petals fall off of it. That's where the idea of a blooming karma comes from. It blooms and then it goes, like we were talking about fall when we started. Oh, isn't that nice? Just brings us full circle here. But it's the idea that something blooms and then it fills its thing and then it dies. The only thing that we can do in those spaces is you don't want to try to control your thoughts, but you do want to make sure that you're always in a space of what's correct action in a particular situation. Sometimes the correct action is to just walk away and let go. Other times the correct action is to say, no, I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to stand up for myself. And again, it's going to vary by situation. It's not always the same thing each time. So anyway, hope all that was interesting for you guys today. Ride the wave. Exactly. And yeah, it's interesting we're talking about all these scientific theories of like resonance and fields, because it is almost like we are waves, or we are literally waves in some way. Like our whole existence is a wave. And Alan Watts has a whole thing on the particle and the wave people. But in any case, that's a different topic, and everybody has to probably get to work or get on with whatever it is they're doing today. So I hope all of you have a really awesome Thursday. We're getting towards the weekend, so those of you who do Monday to Friday, yay, you're almost to the weekend. Oh, you're welcome. And like I said, I'm hoping I know some of you. Oh, I just want to also say really quickly, very interesting, good reminder to sit in the body today. Yeah, oh, you're welcome. Yeah, exactly. And to just kind of be here, but kind of allow things to pass through. There's no need to try to say, no, I can't have that thought. You can't, it's going to be what it's going to be. That's what meditation teaches you. You just kind of let it, it's there. Okay. I observe, and it'll kind of eventually it'll pass by. So, people, okay, Wix did not tell me how many people prepaid the 10 payment for this class. Well, because a lot of people paid by PayPal, so it didn't come up in my Wix payments. I had to actually go through last night and look, and I was like, oh, I have like 3 people who paid the 10 week already. So if you're missing one of the 10 weeks, then I want to make sure that I catch you up, okay? So I'm going to try to do that for those classes. If somebody paid and then they can't make it or whatever, if everybody shows up who's paid for the 10 weeks, then I won't do that. But otherwise, I'm going to try to make sure that I at least record it and give you something to work with. And thank you to everybody who's prepaid, who's invested for the 10 weeks. So that's really awesome. And anybody who hasn't, you can still book week by week. And like I said, we are having the class this Sunday from 4 to 6. And like I said, I'll be in Milford tomorrow doing Rahani work and also doing sound Reiki with the group at night. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.